The squad are back in training for pre-season, and so is the Green and White podcast, brought to you by Argyle Life. Only this time we are not going to be doing laps of Fulston Park's running track. We are just going to sit here and waffle for the next hour or so over what has happened so far this pre-season. Consider it a midsummer recap, not to be disguised as that program that's on ITV3 that shows repeats every couple of nights a week. Joining me this evening is Adam, Sam, and sporting a very nice shirt. Let's get rid of the Clan Dads comment, although we do appreciate it. John Allsop featuring this season's new home strip. We'll be coming on to that, I'm sure, at some point. This is an interactive show, as always. Do like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Do get your questions in. There isn't really a running order or a script that we're going to go by tonight. We're just going to go through things stage by stage, department by department, if you like. Obviously, we've already spoken about Tom Cleverley's appointment, so we don't need to go over old ground. But what we do need to discuss, gentlemen, is our transfer recruitment thus far. And it's been fairly proactive. 5 in the door already, a couple of notable departures. I think we'll probably save 2 of those departures till much later on when we come on to what's happening off the pitch. Adam, you're our transfer guru with the transfer centre. Why don't you kick us off on what's been a busy start for Tom Randell, David Fox, and Tom Cleverley?
It certainly has, yeah. I think a lot of them with the transfer centre updates that I've been doing have not caught any of them going in, with I think is also a bit of a hats off to the team you've just mentioned there for not leaking anything and keeping plenty behind closed doors and getting a lot of these deals done pretty quickly. And yeah,
apart from the signing of Tyrese John Jules, which we all knew about.
This is true. Yes, the 24-year-old former Arsenal academy prospect who signed for us on Friday, Tyrese John Jules. Yeah, that would be the one. I think it's good to see. It's good to see that we've been proactive. It's good to see that we've got to the 22nd of June and there's 5 already in the door. And I do not think we're finished there. I do appreciate that at the very least 3 of these signings and probably 4 of these signings were made with one very specific head coach's style in mind, in a way that perhaps most teams aren't playing anymore. So it was built towards the Miran Muslic way of thinking. And we've now been left with a very different style of play that they're going to have to fit into. But to be honest, a lot of those transfers that were made with Muslic in mind, I think they've all got, or at the very least, 3 of them have got the transferable skills to be successful in a different system. Jamie Patterson is the sort of player who likes to create, likes to be in that situation in the middle, and any manager, to be honest, would be able to work with a player like that. You need your creativity no matter what style you're going with. Caleb Watts, yes, it is a bit of a battler, perhaps a press from the front sort of player, and reminds me a little bit of Darko JB in the way that he's a battling midfielder and also probably at his best from a more advanced position, as every single Middlesbrough fan will tell you. And JB's played under a number of head coaches and has, let's say, mixed reviews. But it wasn't necessarily just because of Muslic's style of play that he had some successes. There are other times he did as well. And the one that is perhaps a little worrying is Jack McKenzie, who seems like a classic Muslic idea of what he'd like from I think a left wing back is how he'd have played in a similar way to how Cornel Such played in the second half of last season, as like a physical presence there. I don't think that suits him, nor, to be honest, do I think a wide centre back suits him. I think he is a left back. He's played much of his career as a left back, and he'd be best for us as a left back, which is great. Obviously, if we need a left back, he's there. Fantastic. It does perhaps go a little bit at odds with Cleverley's system, where he wants attacking fullbacks, if you like. It's going to be quite a narrow thing going on with the wingers, and one of which we'll come on to very shortly. And yeah, I'm not sure if Mackenzie's going to be the sort of player who will be covering that ground from the fullback position. He's very Gary Sawyer coded, in my opinion, from what I've seen. I have no doubt he could drop a 7 out of 10 every week and leave me happy. Whether this system suits him, I don't know if it does. Well, I think it will suit are the final two that I haven't mentioned yet, on Bradley Ibrahim and Xavier Amaechi, who was very recently announced. Ibrahim is, I think, worth keeping in mind regardless that he's only 20. Yes, I do believe he was brought in with Muslic in mind. I think he fits that absolutely perfectly. But he's also, quite surprisingly, for someone of his profile, posted some really good numbers in possession for a Crawley Town side who, let's not forget, also got relegated last season. So he's able to adapt his game. He's very, very good in the duel from what I've seen. And with his age, he's only going to improve. And I think, based on the fact that we have had some midfield departures, who we'll no doubt talk about a little bit later on, he's a really good one to get in. And the only one so far that we've paid a fee for. And I hope that changes as well. Tyrese John Jules came in on Friday. Oh no, hang on. No, it wasn't Tyrese John Jules, was it? Yeah, no, thank goodness for that. Amaechi is the one that's come in. To be honest, I've had a slightly busier time of it in the last few days, as I think most members of this panel are aware, and I haven't had the chance to go over his numbers with a fine-tooth comb as much as I'd like to a little bit as of yet, but hey, exciting winger given the number 10 shirt, and we're keen to see him build on some numbers at another level. Something very similar happened with Morgan Whittaker a couple of years ago, and he had a very, very successful time. And so, yeah, I'm not against, to be honest, any of the players that we've brought in and we've got done very early so far. It's Mackenzie perhaps the exception in the sense that I don't think he's a bad player, but might struggle a little bit more to suit the style. But yeah, I think it's been a very good start in terms of incomings. We've obviously got replacements to make, and we've obviously got to do a bit more in this market than just spending the, I think, £250,000 that we have on Ibrahim so far. But for where we sit, with plenty of time left to get things done, with pre-season only just have started, yeah, I sit here satisfied.
John, come to you next. Simple question, really. Who's the standout of the five for you so far that have come in the door?
Well, actually, I didn't realise we'd paid a fee for Ibrahim. Was that £250,000? Yeah, so I mean, he would be the standout because he costs money. I mean, I would say that it should have been 10, 15, 100 times as much money, probably. I think we should probably have paid them in gold bars, dropped out of a helicopter. I just think it's ridiculous that we aren't paying clubs 10 times the asking price for players, because obviously that's what we should be doing. It's a total lack of ambition to be picking players up on free transfers when we have huge amounts of money to burn and even more amounts of money that we don't have to spend getting ourselves into an inescapable bankruptcy crisis. Oh, sorry, I just had a hit on the head and thought I was Sam Down there for a second, as I'm sure he will come on to in a second. No, the standout player for me, even though he did arrive on a free, I think is Patterson. I think he was a really, really eye-catching signing, especially to get one done so soon after the end of the season. I think, I was on holiday in the Lisbon area and didn't particularly see that one coming. Was on the beach when my phone started buzzing and checked Twitter and saw that we'd signed Patterson. And yeah, I think that on paper that just looks a really, really astute piece of business. Someone who obviously had, I think, a bit of a rocky time out in the MLS last season, but then did, I think, come into Coventry in January and I think he played 8 games or so and scored one very important goal for them. 8 games doesn't sound like too much, but obviously across a half a season period in a team that is right at the top end of the championship and ended up getting into the playoffs and coming very, very close to getting to Wembley. I mean, I don't think that's a terribly small number of appearances. It's a very good sign in terms of a level that you're playing at for someone who is then going to drop down to League One. Obviously, he has bags of other championship experience. I remember watching him for Bristol City, where I think he got generally quite good reviews. Swansea as well. And I think, given that we're losing players who maybe aren't always the oldest, but do have experience, of getting us up and then having those championship campaigns with us. It's exciting to be having younger players coming in as well. I'm definitely, not someone who thinks we should be going down the kind of Derby County 2022-23 route of signing aging kind of former Prem players who are 35, 36, whose legs are great for an hour, and then you could kind of pick them off in the last half hour of games, as we, by the way, intentionally did twice under Stephen Schumacher, to hear him tell it. But I think having, somebody who has a bit more mileage in the legs and maybe isn't going to play every single minute of every game. Although to be fair, he's, I think, what, 33 is not completely ancient. But yeah, to have someone who has that level of championship experience and who has proven willing to drop down, that to me feels like a pretty kind of marquee signing. But that's not to say I'm not excited about the others. But Patterson is the one who stands out to me.
Excellent. What struck me about Patterson is how few games in his career he's actually played at League One level, which is a bit of a enigma, really, and something to look forward to this year. 5 in the door, 1 player from a Championship playoff loser, 1 player from a Scottish Cup winning side who play in the Scottish Premier League, couple of young, exciting English talents signed from Europe. Sam Down. That shows ambition, doesn't it?
It would if I could take myself off mute. Yes, absolutely. I do think that John is right.
Is it enough ambition? Is it enough ambition for you, or would you like to see a little bit more?
I'd like to see a little bit more. That's not to say that more isn't coming. I did give my overall roundup. Is I think that I do agree with John in respect that if we can get him consistently fit and at his best form and playing regularly, Patterson is the most exciting signing. He's proven he can be an excellent number 10 at Championship level, never mind at League One. The only downside is the stage of his career he's at, not just purely in terms of age, because yes, if you look at it purely on that age, it's just a number. 33 isn't actually that old. There's been plenty of players who've played lots and lots of minutes at a far older age, but if you look at actually his individual fitness profile, he did only play a combined 81 minutes for Coventry in the entirety of last season. That's less than 1 game's worth. I don't think he made a single start. I think it was all 5-10 minutes off the bench here and there. Now, admittedly, in one of those, he did actually score a last-minute winner against Pompey, which was pivotal for their playoff push. So you could look at it from the point of view of a goal in 81 minutes is an absolutely fantastic ratio. But I do think that we're going to have to manage his minutes carefully, without a doubt. I don't think he's going to be one who's going to play 40 games a season. I think he's going to probably play more like about 30 or so, maybe a handful of those off the bench. So I think we have to be a little bit careful. Caleb Watts, looks like very much like good squad filler. I think with some of the quality we have in that position, I'm not sure if he's going to start every week. Mackenzie, as with Adam, possibly one of the ones who's lost out most from the change of manager, but maybe he can adapt. Maybe he could even be left centre back in a 4. Ibrahim looks pretty promising. He was probably quite a similar profile to Cipriano, who we were also looking at. And obviously, he went to Watford. I think if you look at his skill set, he's not one to charge about the pitch. He's one to sort of sit deep and dictate stuff from deep. If you look at Crawley's sort of heat map stats last season, which I do occasionally do my research. I know it doesn't always seem it. It was a lot of the time it was Ibrahim and Panucci Kamara, and Panucci Kamara moved and covered a lot more ground than Ibrahim, which is not to be derogatory to Ibrahim. That wasn't his role in the team. He was the one to sort of sit and dictate, and Kamara was the one to charge around a little bit more. And as we all remember from Panucci Kamara, charging around was very much one of his strong suits. So I think Ibrahim is good. I think it's worth pointing out he's not necessarily the box-to-box midfielder we're looking for based on that. But yeah, again, promising young player. And I think Amaechi, have I said that right? I know the club gave a guy, Amaechi, yes. I would say probably looks to pick it a lot. Very good numbers in the 2 Bundesliga, which, as we all know, is a fantastic league of irresistible allure. Picked up good numbers in that league. Very young player, was quite decent when he was on loan at Bolton under Ian Evatt. And I think has a lot of potential resale value. I suppose the only concern I have is with John's slightly tongue-in-cheek viewpoint on it is that I do think that as much as they're all decent signings on paper, very much so, they're probably quite similar to the kind of signings we would have made last time the club was in this league. I don't think that they're real, what you would call like boat pushing out signings financially. And that's fine because not everyone has to be. And obviously, if we do win the league, spending a combined total of, a 6-figure sum, then obviously that's absolutely fantastic because that would again show we're being resourceful. But I do think it's worth pointing out that by the club's own standards, that, many people within the club, Mr. Hallett, Mr. Parkinson, and others have very much said that by going down we're not going to have to overperform anymore because we are going to be one of the teams who can just do big spenders and kind of perform to that level on our own merits. And I think that's worth remembering. Not to say we won't do that, but I think the signings so far like that, I don't know how many of them, when you sit down at the start of the season, you chalk out what's the strongest team going to be. And yes, of course, that can chop and change through the season. Yes, of course, there's injuries, etc. I'm not sure how many of the 5 we've signed so far are bankers for being in that strongest team. I think we've signed some very good rotational players who'll start a few games a season, players who'll come off the bench and change games or see out games even. I don't know how many of the ones we've signed so far are absolutely in the very best team. Like when you look at who Huddersfield have signed so far, they've signed Marcus Harness from Ipswich, who again was a very good player even at championship level. Ryan Ledson from Preston, been a very solid championship player for a number of years, and Joe Rowe and Sean Rofen, who are 2 excellent centre-backs who were 2 of the probably best centre-backs in League One last season, have now been poached by them. So I kind of think for that spending profile, we want to be either A, signing players who were pretty regularly in the Championship, George Saville to Luton, one of those as well. We want to be signing, at not every single signing because it is a squad game, but we want to be having at least 3 or 4 players who are either regulars from the Championship last season or poaching some of the best players in League One last season in their position. And I think at the moment, Ibrahim is probably the closest to that because he was pretty good for Crawley, but I don't think we've really yet made a signing of that profile of the ones for the Huddersfield and Luton I've just listed. Again, that's not to say we won't do. And, there is a very, very obvious reason why, because we had to get a new manager in place. And maybe we were just sort of filling out squad players first of all before going to splash the cash a little bit more in the future. But I do think there is perhaps a danger that we might be getting a little bit left behind in the best available players being snapped up. So, look, to round up my point, if we do continue signing players of the fee profile, etc., that we are and win the league, absolutely amazing. But I do think it is probably time to do what we know we have the money to do and splash the cash a little bit. And hopefully that will come over the coming weeks or months.
Already well over 1,000 people have joined us, and we're not even at the 20-minute mark yet. So very good evening to you all. Do get sharing the live stream around. There you go, John. Sam says it's time we need to start splashing the cash and get on terms with signing championship quality players like Huddersfield. Should we throw £10 million at Stoke for Nathan Lowe?
There we go. Off mute. Sorry, to reiterate, no. No, we shouldn't. The sort of tongue-in-cheek point that I made earlier was based on debates that Sam and I have been having in the group chat, where he has seemed very, very impatient for us to go around spraying money around, and even said something along the words of the cycle of boom and bust in football is over, which to fans of former Prime Minister Gordon Brown might seem a strange thing to say. And I guess the argument we've been having back and forth is a little bit about the relative merits and demerits of totally bankrupting the club in order to sign a bunch of overvalued players who may or may not get us out of League One or something along those lines. Although I think basically we both agree that we shouldn't be bankrupting the club. I think I would say a couple of things. I mean, first of all, and like Sam has also said this, to be fair, I just think it's way, way too early to be making judgments about a lack of ambition based on who we've signed so far. I think, it's easier to get free transfer business done this early, I would say. Some of those more expensive deals can take time. I also think that our transfer strategy seems to have gone a little bit awry, or at least become hit and miss in the last couple of windows, recruiting for the Championship. And I think obviously the principle of that, which probably didn't help, was just trying to relentlessly get good value for money in our dealings, as we proved we were able to do last time we were in this league. When, and going up into the Championship, of course, when, let's face it, we got players like Whittaker and Mumba for an absolute snip, even if that money was kind of pushing the boat out for us. I don't want to abandon those principles just because we have more money. I think we still should be relentlessly hunting for, sound like Rachel Reeves over here, relentlessly hunting for value for money. I don't think we should go, sort of starting a bidding war with Huddersfield for Nathan Lowe, who did very well at Walsall on loan last season in League Two, don't get me wrong, but it's very easy to get dragged into a bidding war with a rival club, and suddenly you're paying what looks like it's over the odds to win that bidding war, and then that player, having had 6 months on loan in League Two, might not actually be that good in League One. I suspect he is a good player, but again, I don't think we should be looking at kind of dispersing silly money for some of these players. So I definitely do want to see us push the boat out a little bit more than we have already financially. I guess a key difference is that I think it's already early, and I do sort of expect us to do that. The other point I would make, though, where I think Sam's argument is a bit of a fallacy is, yeah, okay, you can maybe compare the recruitment to the last time we were in this league. I don't think that's a totally false comparison, but the baseline is completely different. We're now recruiting players into a side that has a number of established good championship players in it already, right? Whereas previously we were recruiting into a team of League One players. We're recruiting into a team this time around that has Pleguezuelo and Such among the defensive options, both of whom I thought in the second half of last season in particular proved that they are easily good enough to be championship defenders. And I think, Connor Hazard, assuming he stays at the club, in goal, clearly a championship goalkeeper. And there are players I think throughout the team as well where you could point to and say these were championship regulars last season and they already belong to us. We signed Michael Baidoo in January for over £1 million, I believe. Clearly he hasn't done it so far. I'm in the optimistic camp with him, or at least the hopeful camp, where I think there were reasons as to why he didn't do so well last season. That might not be because he's totally irredeemable footballer, and maybe he is someone we're going to see the best out of at a slightly lower level now that he's had a extra restful pre-season. Rami Al-Hajj is another one. I think Al-Hajj was actually very good for us at times last season, a player who did cost, again, quite a lot of money, somewhere in the region of £1 million. And someone who I think was a massive victim, basically, of the transition to Muslic ball. I just don't think he suited that system at all. And I'll preempt Sam here because I know Sam will come in and say he actually thinks Al-Hajj did well when he started under Muslic in the tens. I certainly don't think he was a disaster. But yeah, clearly I don't think a kind of high-intensity pressing sort of off-the-ball game is getting the best out of him. Cleverly ball, as we saw it at Watford, I think very much could get the best out of a Rami Al-Hajj type of player. I think it's going to be a high possession type of football that relies on kind of intricate kind of, movement in the final third to break defenses down and relies on players who have that bit of magic to unlock a defense. And I think we've seen that Al-Hajj has that in the Championship, let alone in League One. So, I think it's possible to look at the totality of the business and think, why aren't we spending more money? Why isn't there a kind of League One big name like a Charlie Kelman or a Nathan Lowe or somebody of that ilk who's just kind of one of these hype players of the moment? I think it sort of glosses over that we actually have a very good sort of foundation for the team already, and clearly there will be some more outgoing, so we'll have to wait and see quite what it looks like at the beginning of the season. But I don't think we're building from nothing. I think we're building on a team that has some expensive components, that has quality players already, whereas last time you were looking to kind of supplement a team that had finished 7th in League One and overachieved in doing that the last time that we went up from this level. So I'm not really, I don't think I'm quite as concerned as Sam is. That being said, it would of course be nice to see a couple of transfers that do maybe push the boat out a little more. But I'm not going to complain if there are players that we miss out on who could be good for us just because we're not quite willing to put up the amount of money. I think we need to be judicious and we don't need to pay over the odds. And I think we can afford to be patient as well.
I guess that is the main point we disagree. We definitely don't want to bankrupt the club in either case, and we also would love to sign those quality players. I guess where I maybe slightly differ with you is if there is a player who would make an absolute tangible, big improvement to us, but would not bankrupt us, but would be above what we valued them at, I would be more inclined to say suck it up and just pay the overvalued money, because the downside to that is that we just end up with that money just kind of
so like
nothing.
A little, I certainly don't think we should be, penny wise and pound poor about this. And if there are players who, it's a little bit eye watering or whatever, but we really, really think they're the right player for us, I do sort of agree with you. Where I don't agree is that you want to sort of become the club who are known for, if you hold out on them, they will just up and up the price and they'll cave. Like, I think there is a happy medium to be struck here. And actually, you don't want to kind of abandon having a reputation for shrewd business and become the kind of club, that sort of sprays money around willy-nilly to achieve their objectives, because those clubs are the ones that end up getting fleeced for average players, in my experience.
And I'm looking at the comments. I'm seeing, if there is that statement player, who could it be? I'm seeing mentioned of Kelman. I'm seeing mentioned of Kelly Dunn. I think either of those would be fantastic. I'm also seeing a mention of Konave and Wickham, and I think that would be incredibly optimistic, given he's linked with West Ham for about 12 million. But God loves a trier. Who knows? Maybe we can try. But
the West Ham link was absurd, though.
Oh, it was absurd, but it just shows the kind of money Wickham were looking at for him, and even I think that would be totally reckless overspending if we would spend anything like that on Kone. But Kelman would be great. Nathan Lowe would be great. Either of those, I think, would absolutely constitute that marquee. So I think Langstaff, yeah, you know what? I don't hate it. He didn't do too well in the Championship, but he didn't do terribly either. And we do know League One is a big step down from the Championship, so I wouldn't be against Langstaff.
I'm going to bring Adam back in to the Sam and John show this evening. Adam, we're going to mix it on to departures, because then I'm going to spin it back round to one question about potential incomings moving forward. Obviously, we've had two noteworthy departures who we're going to come on to in due course, but we've also had Daniel Grimshaw depart the football club to Norwich City for roughly rumoured to be around the money we paid for him last summer. And we've also had Jordan Houghton leave at the expiration of his contract. And I don't think, although we've been live a couple of times since, I'm not sure we've actually touched on Houghton's departure. And I feel like it's right we do, because here's a guy who, for what, 160, 170 games, however many it was over a couple of spells for Argyle, absolutely gave his all whenever he was on the pitch. He wasn't everybody's cup of tea, but he was a part of the 101 club, and therefore gets a pass for life, doesn't he?
I think it's something that's been said before on this podcast, and alas, will not be said anymore because we can't do it. But we went through a significant cycle of midfielders trying to find the best combination, trying to find what would suit us the most in the Championship, and every single time went back to Adam Randell and Jordan Houghton. Randall's one we'll discuss in a moment, I'm sure, but I think Houghton's ability to just be that man in the middle, deliver more often than he doesn't, and almost be overlooked, but again, he'll he'll find his way back in. Is pretty remarkable. And it's just over two spells, he was an excellent servant. And to be honest, I'm a little bit disappointed that he's not staying with us. I think there's an argument that it suits all parties to cut it short there, but I think he had another season in him with us for sure, particularly at League One level. And given the other midfield departure that we'll no doubt talk about, along with the loans that we haven't renewed, I think having Houghton around, he'd certainly be in my first 11 if the season started tomorrow. Let's put it that way. He was, as the comment on screens there, he's reliable. He brought the best out of others, Randell being one of them. I think was actually I look back to the role he had to play in what was an extremely attacking team, just as we were promoted to the Championship, where he was the single pivot in midfield, trying to hold everything together in what was a very difficult system to do so, and he managed it, and he adapted to that role, and was just what we needed at that time. It's I think it's a shame he's gone. I can understand why he's gone for his own reasons, and I can understand why we as a club perhaps didn't push a little bit harder to keep him around. But yeah, I'd have preferred if he stayed. Let's put it like that. The other departure you mentioned, Dan Grimshaw, I am staggered by, to be honest. Not the fact that Norwich have bought him. I can understand, based on previous seasons, perhaps, maybe not the time he had under Wayne Rooney, why a Championship team would like to have him around, and why a club like Norwich, who have that sort of money, would be willing to pay for him when they have no goalkeepers on the books, and he's someone they can bring in to at least be around for a figure below £1 million, which at that level of the Championship is hard to come by. So I can see why they've done it, but I'm really pleased they have. Nothing against Grimshaw himself, who I think had a really tough time of it, partly based on who he was playing under. But the fact we've managed to go through a transfer that hasn't really worked out for us and managed to recoup what we believe is everything we paid, I think that's a brilliant piece of business, personally. And I think the only regretful part of it, perhaps, is that we've now brought in Tom Cleverley, who Dan Grimshaw's distribution style could perhaps suit a lot more than it does Connor Hazard. So that, unfortunate maybe, but I think when you go through any transfer that isn't particularly successful, and I was going to say cut your losses. You don't, not even cutting our losses, just getting the money back we paid and letting it move on. I think this is a rare case because usually in these sorts of deals or any sort of transfer deal, there's always a loser somewhere. In this case, I think this is a rare one where this deal suits all parties. We get our money back, Grimshaw stays in the Championship, and Norwich get a player who, on his day, can suit their system well and can deliver at Championship level when given time. So, yeah, nothing against the bloke. Possibly a little bit more against his dad, to be fair. But yeah, I think very, very solid business all around.
Yeah, I would say be careful, but he's blocked us as grim dad, so he's probably not going to see our contributions. On that, jokes aside, I think anyone who knows what I'm referring to will know, so I'm not going to need to elaborate it any further. But there is quite a large part of me that actually wishes we could have seen how it had gone with Grimshaw under Tom Cleverley, because under his Watford side, he, to the same extent as Rooney, to be clear, executed it far better by all accounts, but to the same extent as Rooney attempted to play it out from the back. Yes, he isn't very good at command of area. That is a weak spot, but in League One, with lower quality of balls going into the box, that might not be such of an issue. The shot-stopping side of it was, I think Adam would say the stats are probably variable under Rooney. His shot-stopping percentages started well and got worse. The shot stopping at Blackpool is actually consistently quite excellent. So, if you can get back to that Blackpool shot stopping form and combine it with his ability to play out, he might be a better player for Norwich than some of us are thinking he might be. And it's an interesting stat, actually. The goals prevented per 90 metric is quite a niche stat, but it's one I paid a bit of attention to. Now, the goals prevented is based on the average shot against his keeper. How much does the keeper essentially save it, more or less, than any other than the average keeper? It's quite a bad way of explaining it, but I think you all probably, hopefully, just about get what I mean. Now, the most overall goals prevented last season was James Trafford, because he played, I think, every minute of every game bar one. But the most goals prevented per minute last season for a player who missed a lot of minutes was actually Conor Hazard. And I think the most goals prevented per minute in the 23-24 season was Michael Cooper. And the most goals prevented per minute in the Championship in the 22-23 season, you guessed it, Dan Grimshaw. So it's kind of funny how these keepers who all put up absolutely exceptional shot-stopping numbers all either played for / went on to play for Plymouth Argyle. So that's kind of, certainly said something good about maybe our goalkeeping coach, Darryl Verhaven, and, perhaps our recruitment, team's ability to, former recruitment team as it was, their ability to spot good goalkeepers. But yeah, I thought that was quite an interesting stat. So if Dan Grimshaw can get that shot stopping back up to his very best and combine that with good playing out from the back, Norwich might actually have a surprisingly good keeper on their hands. So Richard said that means the defence has been shocking for that time, and yes, that's part of it, but that isn't the whole story, because that would explain the goalkeepers having the most saves outright, but having the most goals prevented per minute means they're actually doing more than the average keeper would against those shots. So I still think it does actually say that we've had keepers who, obviously, Hazard for Argyle, Cooper the year before, and Grimshaw when he was at Blackpool, that those keepers who've either been at the club or went on to sign for the club are all very good shot stoppers, or all can be very good shot stoppers on the day. There's me dipping my toe into the stats pool. I'll keep that with Adam for, and Nick when he's on going forward. But I hope Adam will agree I didn't do too badly with that.
Not too badly. Not too bad. I will perhaps push back on the final bit there, where even if we are looking at goals prevented, you do have more of an ability to build up those goals prevented the more shots you face. So of course you'd expect the likes of Hazard, Cooper, Grimshaw, and the teams they were playing in to be up there if they're good shot stoppers. And by the way, is the thing that makes James Trafford's shot stopping last year so unbelievable, is that he was still able to prevent the most goals despite playing in a frankly incredibly mean Burnley defence.
And it's the thing that means Scott Parker should not have been nominated for Manager of the Year, because that was a James Trafford rescue mission season.
It was, and well, Scott Parker's a fraud. I think we all know that already. But yeah, aside from that, I think thanks for dipping your toe into the stat-based pool, and we look forward to having you back.
And just quickly, in terms of Sam's wish that Grimshaw had stayed, obviously Grimshaw has already proven his ability to be integral to goals for a Tom Cleverley side. So who knows where that would have gone.
Very, very good. But then you're also integral to saving, making saves that day as well. I think that's the first time I've ever seen it where a goalkeeper has completely let one in under his body, has passed it directly to a player for a one-on-one, and yet still rightly earned man of the match with how good he was in basically every other aspect of his performance that day. So, yeah, interesting. But you know what? If it's a case that we've said to Dan Grimshaw, look, do you want to stay and fight for your place under the new system? And if he's had such a bad experience in Plymouth and maybe a bad experience with certain family members of his slagging off other Argyle personnel, perhaps he might see that a clean slate outside of Plymouth may be the best outcome for him. And if that's the case, then so be it.
Best of luck to Dan Grimshaw, who heads to Norwich City, and thank you and good luck to Jordan Houghton, and best wishes to him and his family as they move to Stevenage. I would not be surprised if by the end of the season Jordan Houghton was wearing Stevenage's captain's armband. I think he's a brilliant professional and one of those sorts of players that you'll only really appreciate just how steady a pair of hands he was now that he has left the football club, but he has moved to Stevenage.
Just quickly, I think Stevenage could be shaping up to be dark horses next season. I quite like that.
This isn't Sam. This isn't a season preview. That's coming later on. Right. Let's wrap up the transfer window activity then, because it's also.
Sorry, Sheffield Wednesday will go down. Oh wait, sorry. You said this. You said okay. So no, wait. I'll hold my fire. Sorry.
Yeah, just don't shoot your shot just yet, John. Let's round off the transfer activity so far then, because it's also going to segue nicely, I think, into our next big talking point, and that is, in the last week, I have been listening to REM's Everybody Hurts on a constant loop on my Spotify as two of Plymouth Argyle's most recent great servants, Adam Randell and Ryan Hardie, have both departed the football club for utterly derogatory transfer fees. Ryan Hardie has departed for Championship New Boys Wrexham, whilst Adam Randell has departed his hometown club and made the short trip up the road to Bristol City to join Gerhard Struber's revolution there at Ashton Gate. Rumoured to be around the 700 grand mark for Hardie, 600 to 700,000 pounds for Randell, depending on which journalist you take the information off, thus meaning we have sold probably around £3.5–4 million worth of talent for just £1.4 million at least. Release clauses are a load of codswallop, aren't they, unfortunately, in times like this, because we've been shortchanged to really good players. Who wants? I'll just leave it open to the three of you, really. I'm pretty disappointed at the fees we've received, but is this just life when you get relegated?
I'll jump in on this one because I feel like I have the unearned reputation of being a happy clapper who always defends the club and the board in here. And I think it's true sometimes that I do take a more nuanced or reasonable view than some others who are prone to criticizing them in more strident terms. But this is a huge cock up, right? I don't think there's really any way, and obviously we don't know entirely what's going on behind the scenes. We weren't privy to these contract negotiations. We don't know exactly how they went down, et cetera, all those kind of usual caveats. And I will, obviously do take those caveats seriously, but I just can't really see any world in which this was ever considered to be a sensible idea, right? So we were, I think, I don't know if we were the bookies' favourites for relegation last year. I believe we certainly were the season that we came up from League One, and we probably should have been rightly among the pre-season favourites to go down in both of those seasons. So even if you are the club and you sort of believe your own hype and believe in your ability to beat the odds and don't think relegation is a likely prospect, you have to concede that, like, statistically or just kind of, in gamblers' terms, we were a good bet to go down in both of those seasons, right? So I think it just seemed very smart to me to hedge against that and protect your best assets. And I believe these contracts were probably negotiated a couple of years ago. Was it the season between League One and the Championship? So
both contracts were signed in summer of 2023. Yes.
Right. So then, assuming these contracts were, the exact terms that we're talking about were finalized in 2023 and that they haven't changed since then, I cannot understand a world in which you imagine going down this summer and those players are still here and they are getting moves and neither of them is considered to be a huge asset, right? Because that is those two players with 2 years of championship experience under their belts. Now, Hardie, I think it would be potentially fair to say that we're very surprised by how well he's done in the Championship. It wasn't necessarily foreseeable that he would do so well, and massive credit to him for beating those expectations. Adam Randell was an up-and-coming, very young midfielder with clear ability to hugely improve. And not only that, but was kind of a talismanic figure, local lad, done good, hugely passionate about the club. The lack of foresight to think that not only could you not go down within 2 championship seasons, but that those 2 players, in the event that you did go down, wouldn't be worth more than what in today's parlance is an absolute pittance in transfer fees, is astonishing to me. I just cannot understand how we have possibly signed off on those terms. And yeah, maybe we would have had to offer more wages in exchange, but I think based on those 2 players' contributions, it would have been very, very hard to say that those extra wages wouldn't have been well spent. And also probably, in all likelihood, would have been a down payment on much, much bigger transfer fees for those players eventually that would have ended up making us more money in the long run than we saved. It just strikes me as a clear example of being penny wise and pound poor. And yeah, earlier on I said, we need to do good deals and we need to be sensible financially as a club, and I still stand by that, but there has to be a happy medium, and in this case it seems like we've absolutely screwed ourselves out of foreseeable larger transfer fees for 2 excellent players in a pretty likely eventuality, and I think it's embarrassing that we've got this so wrong, frankly.
Just before one of the other lads jump in, I just want to bring up this comment by Superintendent on YouTube that said it only happened because we went down. Regardless of the fee, we'd have had to have cashed in anyway. They wouldn't re-sign. Well, I don't agree to that school of thought at all. We didn't have to cash in, and they wouldn't have had to have re-signed because they're under contract in 12 months. And if all goes to plan this year, and we get another league winners medal around our neck or a promotion medal around our neck, and they're in the Championship again, then they're going to re-sign. I am absolutely confident. I do not know Ryan Hardie or Adam Randell personally. I am absolutely confident that neither of those 2 players would have actively forced a move away from Plymouth Argyle. I am sure of it. With the understanding I have of their character, neither of them will have pushed to get back to the Championship like this. They would not. It wouldn't have been them canvassing to try
and also
fees
Joe,
in. I just don't understand it.
They've also both been pretty clear in their exit interviews that they have purely gone to play Championship football, and I believe both of them. I don't think they would have left if we had stayed up.
Absolutely.
I think if we had stayed up, I think they would both have signed new contracts to extend their time here even further. Is my sense. I could be wrong about that, but that's
I agree with that. But then again, I suppose as somebody who is actually in a minute going to go off on a little bit of a rant, sticking up for those 2 players against somebody abusive they're getting online, certainly Randell. I suppose also no one's ever going to say they've left more money in the next interview, are they? I think everyone's a bit better media trained than that, so I do agree. And
Tab, to be clear, I'm saying I believe them. I'm not saying it's guaranteed they're telling the truth. I just in these 2 cases I happen to believe them. Yeah.
I believe them to be clear, but I think money would have played some part in it, and quite rightly so. It's a short career, and Adam Randell's getting married next year. Maybe we'll be looking to start a family at some point. Ryan Hardie's already got a young family, so that's not in any way denigrating them for money coming into it. I think it's worth considering at least that part of the equation. But in a broader sense, I do agree to both of what both of you are saying in respect. I do think those fees could have been better negotiated. If we'd have sitcom to Ryan Hardie, Adam Randell, you know what? Regarding the release fees, I have a little bit more sympathy with the club for Hardie than I do for Randell. I'll explain why. Hardie in summer 2023 was already out of contract. Randell had a year left on his contract, and we were looking at extending it by a further 2 years. So Hardie, a player who was already out of contract, could have just walked out for nothing, probably had a little bit more negotiating power from him or his agent to offer, whereas Randell was under contract for a year anyway. But I honestly feel with both of those, certainly with Randell, and even to an extent with Hardie, if you'd have said, look, we are going to have a release clause for you, so if you go down, you will sometimes need to leave. It's going to be 1 million rather than, whatever it was rumored, 500, 600, 700. It's somewhere in that ballpark. If we'd have said your release fee is going to be 1 million, or even, pushed about a bit to 1.25 million, but on the plus side, we're going to pay you, $1,500 a week more for that time, then that means over those 2 seasons, that's what 100 weeks, give or take. We're then paying 150,000 more to them in wages, but making at least 500,000 more than what we're selling them on, or even if we make $250,000 more, that's still 100. That's still 100 grand up on what we are now. So even with the most absolute generous of cigarette packet mathematics, I do feel that if we'd have compromised a bit more on wages and been a bit more hardline on release clauses, we could have either, in the most optimistic scenario, as Joe describes, could have kept them on for League One, or even in the scenario whereby they were still dead set on leaving, could have got more money for them if they had the release clause at a higher level. So I do think
Sam,
made, yeah.
But Sam, surely Adam Randell and Ryan Hardie will not have been our highest paid players in the Championship. I'd be
No.
amazed if that's the case. And surely the foresight of last year, what happened staying up on the final day against Hull, would have been a bit of a light bulb moment that we're not quite there yet in terms of Championship football. And to protect our assets, I said this towards the back end of the... Yeah, I said that this is when it should have been done. It shouldn't have been done at the end of this season, trying to talk to the players. And not only that, I said this a couple of weeks ago on here, that to give Randell and Hardie even their Championship wage, but then another 5-10% on top for next season in League One, whilst yes, it's not really wise business practice to be paying them that money at that level, to replace them now is going to cost considerably more than it is to give them that money, surely.
Not if we don't spend any money, Joe.
No, I agree. But I suppose the scenario that I would put to you, if they are that dead set for their career's sake of playing on the Championship, even if we did offer them, and to be clear, I've heard, this is not from any, ironclad source, but I've heard vague rumours about roughly the kind of figure Wrexham might be paying Hardie, and let's just say, we couldn't match that, being financially sensible, we just couldn't. But even if we made him our highest paid player ever, even if we got remotely in the ballpark of what Wrexham were offering him, he may still watch Championship football. So you know what? I do feel, having got as far as this summer from the position where David Fox walked into the business, he was fighting an uphill battle to keep those two players at the club. In truth, even from when Stuart Webber walked into the business in January with us rock bottom of the league, he was probably also fighting an uphill battle to keep those two players at the club. For me, this unfortunately falls on a certain man who, with all the best will in the world to him, was very amicable company in Spain, but perhaps wasn't proactive enough in tying down our assets. And for me, that man has now left the football club and hopefully will have learned lessons from perhaps his errors.
I was going to say also, I've seen some of the comments suggesting, clearly, we're not as big as we think we are, and they were going to leave one way or another. I accept they might have left. For me, though, them leaving at £1 million+ because that's what we've written into their contracts, and we're not going to settle for a penny less. Yeah, absolutely. I don't begrudge either of them leaving in these circumstances, to be clear. I certainly wouldn't have begrudged them going for more money. It just seems like a financially, short-sighted decision that we've made, if all of the reported details of these things are correct.
Adam, coming to you on this before we wrap it up and move on to the second half of this sort of debate. It's a comment that's coming from SR on YouTube. We're not just necessarily bitter about this because of the current regime at Home Park or what the director of football might have not done or might have done, what the chief executive's doing, not doing. It's not just this regime. This just feels like it's gone on at Argyle almost for generations. Like this, it doesn't feel like whoever's incumbent at Plymouth Argyle Football Club learns from this, and we're always leaving contracts the last minute. Yes, we were proactive last season with Pleggy, giving him a new deal, getting on the ball with him. But they stick out like a sore thumb, those sorts of decisions, don't they? Because they're few and far between.
They are, and I think it links into the point John was making regarding that the end of the first season in the Championship was the time to sit down, protect our assets, and discuss what's going on with these, not at the end of the season where we went down, which, I mean, who could foresee a team that hired Wayne Rooney would go down and suddenly realise, oh God, we need to deal with this, or we're gonna lose him for nothing. And that contract issue has been a problem. It's also been an issue actually maximising the value we get for our players for a long time. And I know there's the classic comments about the Plymouth tax, although adjudication panel, admittedly, it should be the other way around, because a tax would imply they have to pay more. It turns out everybody comes and it's Plymouth bargains we find ourselves. And I just feel like if we played this market, if we played the market in a way that we do with a lot of our incomings, by the way, a lot of our incomings in the past 5-10 years are something we've done very well in getting players for prices below what perhaps would be considered market value, with Mumba and Whittaker the very, very obvious examples. We are so much better at that than we are playing the outgoing market. And for this model to be a complete success, the outgoing market is just as important, arguably more important than who we bring in, maximizing our assets and getting the money rolling to allow us to improve and increase the budget. I look at Whittaker. I know there's a comment coming in that saying we had Burroughs pants down for 6 million, and hey, based on the first part of this season, or rather the second part of the season during this time there, perhaps we did. But had we cashed in a year earlier, we were talking about an 8-figure sum. And it's just things like that. Like, okay, well, we could have sold him then and almost doubled our money there and been able to reinvest that in the squad. These two, exactly the same. Had we been on top of it, had we been proactive at the end of the first season, got their contract situation sorted, as we very rarely do, we could have easily doubled the money that we're getting now for both players. There's another example I use, which is, but perhaps a little bit extreme, because it's something that was never going to be kept up. But I remember in the COVID season, there was talk about getting a 7-figure fee for Luke Jeffcott, and we didn't do it. We didn't cash in, and he went downhill very quickly. So I'm not saying that Jeffcott was worth that money in the market, nor am I saying that Whittaker was worth 8 figures in the market. But when this is happening, and when this is the opportunity to get this money is in front of us, and we're not doing it, and we're underselling ourselves, it makes the whole model of being like a Brentford, being like a Brighton, fall on its face a little bit. And I just feel like it's foresight that regretfully has been the part of this regime that has been one of the worst parts, alongside the decision making. That's another story. And yeah, it's a real shame. It's a real shame, and I'm hopeful that the new men we've got in, the fact we've got a football man on the board, like him or loathe him, I think it's very handy to have a football man on the board, and is going to be something that's helpful to us, and something that makes sure we don't find ourselves in this situation again. I'm hoping that's the case, because yeah, we've been done over here, and honestly, we've been done over for far too long. I will just take up the comment that I did see come in from our good friend, the Argyle analyst, in the way of whether I'd have sold Whittaker on the 30th of January or 30th of August 2024. Yeah, I probably would have both, depending on what was available. I think we could also have been pretty proactive and sold Whittaker a little bit earlier in that January window as well, and gave ourselves a little bit more time to get a replacement in, although that would have been money spent by Ian Foster. So maybe a blessing in disguise, I don't know. But yeah, there was plentiful opportunity, I think, particularly in that January window, to maximise what we've got, and we didn't do it. We need to start doing it. Or we're going to end up in situations like this in a year or two's time where we're like, oh, Christ, we've lost one of our assets now for peanuts when we shouldn't have done. And I've said all of this without acknowledging another one that's come in of Michael Cooper being sold for £2 million, which is pathetic. Yeah, it's got to stop. It makes me sad. It makes us all sad, I can tell. And I hope the current regime now does an awful lot better.
Did you want to have something very quickly just to round it off?
Yeah, fairly quickly anyway. I would like to say that I'm going to also go slightly, do what John did to an extent, maybe meet in the middle, and also go slightly against my reputation of being the one who likes to have a moan about the hierarchy of the club and defend them a little bit in some aspects. And I emphasise in some aspects because I do think all four of us can agree, and probably almost everyone watching can agree, that the release clauses were too low. Where I'm going to defend them is we don't know if the it's a few grounds actually. We don't know if the negotiations with Randell and Hardie did take place from the start of 2025 on, but it may well have been that they said let's have a look and look at it again at the end of the season kind of job. Yes, perhaps it should have happened the summer after survival, but again, we don't know. At that point, they both still had 2 years left on the contract. They may well have both thought, at that point, with 2 years left on the contract, it's a little too early. So we don't necessarily know if some of those conversations weren't had. At the end of the day, you can sort of tie players down and force them to stay. So I think that's worth bearing in mind as well, particularly if part of that negotiation is you're basically saying to them, look, lads, we're going to pay you a bit more per week, but we're also going to take away your release clauses. They might think of it, you've just appointed Wayne Rooney. Let's just see how we get on before we start having that conversation. with all due respect to Wayne Rooney. So I'm going to stick up for them a little bit in that regard. I'm also going to stick up for them in regard of not selling Whittaker in January 2024, because at that point, it's impossible to state how high his stock was. At that point, the perception was very much that he could just keep on going and going. He could have a 20, 25 goal season. And if we'd have sold him, then relegation at that point under Ian Foster would have felt very, very highly probable. Indeed, was keeping him gave us a great chance to relegation. And by the way, that was exactly how it turned out. I absolutely strongly feared if we'd have sold Whittaker that late January window, we would have gone down under Foster or even under Dewsnip if he came in as caretaker. Yes, Whittaker wasn't as good that second half of the season as he was the first half of the season. He still had some absolutely critical goals. The equaliser at Blackburn being one, putting us into the lead at Coventry home being one, the famous first away win, the winner at Swansea being one, and also there was another one. It might come back to me, but there's three at least. I would actually have sold him at the end of August, and he got us the Liverpool game as well, as Graham points out. All that not being said, I would actually have sold him in August 2024, because at that point I was so, and I said this at the time, so I'm not rewriting history. At that point, I was so sure that we were going down under Rooney that I would have just said, well, let's stuff it. Let's just go down with our pockets full of money rather than go down having, cut price on Whittaker. And in reality, it was somewhere in between. We sold him in January, which was more money than we'd have got from this summer, but also less money than we'd have got from in August 24, and we went down. So yeah, I'll stick up for the club on, I'm not selling Whittaker in January 24th, even though I do agree they should have sold him in August 24. I'll stick up for them on, the negotiations with Randell and Hardie. And the third one I'm going to slightly stick up for them on is regards Cooper, because I think Cooper, we got very badly screwed over by his injury, what happening when it did in that February of 2023. I feel if that injury hadn't happened by then, he would have stayed first choice keeper for that title season. We'd have probably won the league even more convincingly than we did with Cooper in goal, or certainly conceded less goals than we did with Cooper in goal. And I think at that summer, he would have been 23 years old, just played a full title winning season, probably been, he was in League One team of the season anyway, even with his injury. He may even have been the candidate for League One outright player of the season if he hadn't got injured. And at that point, the bidding war would have been enormous. What actually really screwed us to the club was the timing of his injury, by the way, because we then couldn't sell him that summer. And we were at a point of thinking, oh no, if he gets back fit and is up to good form, he's going to be out of contract summer 2024, and then he could end up leaving us on a free. And I think actually not enough credit gets given to Michael Cooper for signing that extension by a year, because actually he helped us out. But if he hadn't have signed that extension, if he'd come back in and played as well as he did in the Championship after his injury, by the way, we would have lost him for nothing. So I know losing him for $2 million wasn't great. I do actually feel that by extending that 1 year to make sure we at least got something for him was good business, and actually also credit to him himself for agreeing with that, because I think that shows that although he is self-interested, as all footballers are self-interested, like that, I've seen a comment coming up from someone called Mike in the comments saying, for all the love for the club, players like Cooper and Randell have had, it's amazing how quickly and easily they left. Mike, I just don't agree. Cooper did not have to sign an extension. The fact that he did meant we got $2 million for him rather than $0 million for him, because he could have so easily gone on a free that summer of 24. So I think Cooper was just bad luck with the injury. But that's not let the club completely off the hook, because the release clauses for Hardie and Randell were not good enough.
Yeah, it's bad luck when it happens once. It would be my response. It's bad luck when you go into a situation like the Cooper deal and goes, oh, he's got an injury, an awful time. We've at least tried our best, and it's just not worked out. We've got a low fee. When you're getting a low fee, what feels like every single time since we got it to the Championship, something's badly wrong.
Actually,
I like it. Sorry to round off, but it's not to let them off the hook for the low release clauses for Hardie, Randell, and by the way, for Gibson with a 1.5 million in the Championship was quite low. 1.5 million if we'd have gone down, or even 1 million if we'd gone down, absolutely fair enough. But with Gibson in the Championship, I think we should have been putting that in at 2 million. But there we go.
I don't agree on the Gibson one particularly. I think that was a relatively fair price. And I actually do agree with you on Cooper and on Cooper in particular. The thing about Hardie and Randell is if you are a if you are a player trading club, if that's going to be your model, as I think we have said explicitly that it is, and clearly is the case that it is that. This is a case of one player who would have been pure profit after we developed him, and another player, Hardie, who would have been more or less pure profit after we paid. I can't remember how much we paid for him, but not a huge amount of money when we signed him from Blackpool for an undisclosed fee, as the song goes. So, these just seem to be absolutely paradigmatic cases of pure profit for players, or essentially pure profit for players that we have developed and improved. And in both cases, we got shafted. And I don't think there are any mitigating circumstances really in either of those players' cases that suggest to me that it couldn't have been better if we had been more organised and had more foresight. Cooper, actually, I do actually completely agree with you. There were mitigating factors. Whittaker, I think, is complicated as well for the reasons that you cite. I'm not trying to say that this is like something that, we've done horribly across the board and there's been no bad luck or anything else involved. Hardie and Randell both seem like cases where this should not have happened, and there are no excuses that I can see.
Yeah, and I just want to say, absolute final thing, Joe, and I'll try and make this point in 90 seconds or less if I can. I do feel that some of the comments, particularly aimed at Randall, are really out of order on social media, I have to say. I think, when he's a local lad, he should have shown more loyalty. I put a thread on Twitter. If any of you want to hear my more in-depth ramblings, look at Samdown93 on X, formerly Twitter. But my central point is, why should we expect loyalty just because he's a local lad? We released 2 players this week, or last month, whatever, Will Jenkins-Davies and Jack Bernard, who was the young first-year pro. They were local lads. We didn't show more loyalty to them because they were local lads. We released them because, with all the will in the world, they're not quite of the standard we need them to be. And actually, that's not a slight at all against Will Jenkins-Davies, who whenever I've seen him play a certain good player, and I actually think he could be like a Clyde Lolos who goes down and finds his way back up. I actually do think that is quite a possible trajectory for Will Jenkins-Davies. I think he's got a lot of quality. So that's not a slight on him. But at the moment, he's not quite the level we need him to be for us to offer him a contract. So why does that loyalty only work for the player has to be loyal to the club forever, not the other way around? At the end of the day, football clubs act in self-interest, players act in self-interest, and for us, Adam Randell, he's proven with the quality of his performances over the last year that he is of a higher level than League One, and he is very capable of playing for a championship side. Wayne Rooney loved him, Miron Mudlic loved him, Tom Cleverley loved him even when he was Watford manager, and Bristol City and 2 other clubs, rumoured to be Derby and Blackburn, possibly Swansea, although mixed reports on that one, have all activated his release clause. He's chosen to go to Bristol City, quite understandably, because they're the best team of the lot. So ultimately, in that regard, would I have loved it if he'd have said, no, I love Argyle so much, I'm going to be loyal and I'm going to sign a 5-year contract and I'm going to stay at the club forever and get to 400 appearances? Of course I'd have loved that. But we can't expect it of him. We absolutely can't expect it of him, because if he then got to the point where he wasn't performing of a good enough standard for us, we'd be bidding him out the door. So if he's of a standard where his performances are better than ours as the club, he's going to be bidding us out the door. That's just how football works. And as Joe said in our group chat the other day, if you want loyalty, buy a dog. And actually, I think with Randell and Cooper, they've actually shown how, certainly in the case of Cooper, by signing that year extension, he's actually shown how much loyalty he did show for us. And I just said he didn't have to sign it. And with Randell, I think, again, if we'd have stayed up, he absolutely would have stayed with us. So it's one of those, but I don't think that people, and I think a lot of the time people expect footballers to only exist for their own entertainment. They're not. They're fully self-actualized human beings, and they want to get the best career for themselves. Yes, to money-wise, if they've got young families or whatever, and it's a short career, but also for their own sense of achievement. They want to push themselves to be the very best people they can be. I cannot blame them for wanting to play championship football for what I suspect could actually be 2 playoff chasing sides for Bristol City and Wrexham, and I can't blame them at all for doing so. And I feel that somebody has to say that to kind of push back on some of the comments I've seen calling him a Judas or a traitor, or some words I won't even repeat, frankly. And that's it. That's me.
What's the dog's release clause? Release pause. Show myself out.
Moving on.
If that's Sam's idea of 90 seconds, then bugger me. We're in for a long Q&A section at the end of this podcast. The final point I would make on all of this is that, the football club and superintendent uses the comment here on YouTube is that the football club will spin it on the fact that for Randell, Hardie, Whittaker, Gibson and Cooper, all of those players, we have made a considerable profit on all of them, on the money that they have left home park for. Obviously, 2 of them are academy prospects. One was signed for £1 million, one was a free transfer, and one was about 200 grand from Blackpool, wasn't it? So we've made a considerable profit on all of them. Unfortunately, this is where it goes back to the last fans forum, and people were calling for football people on the board. That those are business decisions that have taken those players out of home park, not footballing reasons. It's business decisions. But look, we're balanced on this podcast tonight. We've praised the football club for the business they did with the Dan Grimshaw transfer, and we've had a little bit of a moan, I suppose. The more the fees paid than anything else for Randell and Hardie. So to round off this part of it, all that's left again to do is to wish 2 brilliant members of the 101 club, and there aren't many of them left, all the very best for the rest of their careers. Ryan Hardie's been, I'm going to try not to tear up as I say this, Ryan Hardie's been an unbelievable servant to Plymouth Argyle over the last 5.5 years. 12th on our all-time leading goal scorer charts, inside the top 50 in all-time appearances, I believe, for the football club at all levels, from League 2 right to the Championship, but on every step of the way. Yes, he's a streaky player. Yes, he frustrates people with his finishes. But one thing he has been is absolute box office with the moments he's given us. And I'm sure Portsmouth fans are delighted that he's going to be back at Fratton Park next year, running through one-on-one with whoever they have in goal. And for Adam Randell, it brings to end his fairy tale, playing for his hometown club. He gets the chance to go to a solid Championship club who are on an upward trajectory in Bristol City. It almost feels like a really, really good match for Randell. So we wish both of them all the very best, and their families. There's always going to be a place at home park where their faces can be painted onto the wall with the 101 club underneath it. They are welcome back anytime they want, especially in January on loan, if they can't get a spot at their respective clubs. So that brings an end to that. And whilst we're talking about getting money in, I think we've all just about got over the news that Gareth Bale is interested in Plymouth Argyle, and then Gareth Bale had no interest in Plymouth Argyle, depending on which journalist you trust. This was a news story that almost put me onto ringing Devon doctors, I think, and their out of hours number when I read it the other day. I almost had an embolism reading the news story. I couldn't believe that what I was reading. And then within a week, me hopes and my bubbles have been burst. And Gareth Bale was never interested in Plymouth Argyle. For what it's worth, Sam, John, Adam, I don't know who wants to take it. I get a feeling that Gareth Bale is the face of a group who want to invest in an English football club, and they're just going to pit about 3 or 4 football clubs against one another and try and get the best deal for themselves. That's not going to be what Plymouth Argyle are interested in, is it?
I think you're correct in your first assessment that that's what they're doing. Yeah, the latter.
My impression, to be honest, is very much in a similar vein of maybe it was Cardiff with the Gareth Bale link. Of course, it would make a lot of sense that they were always interested in him. My impression has been that they leaked the story, tried to use Plymouth Argyle's name to get Vincent Tan to hurry up and sell the club to us already. Yeah, it's. I mean, it's never a dull moment, is there? having Gareth Bale linked to your club and a couple of heartbreaking outgoings in the same week. It's a strange one, but yeah, that's my impression at the moment. I could be wrong. This maybe isn't over, depending on which journalist you feel is the most trustworthy. But it's a strange one, and it's I don't know. I'm keen to see how it develops. I can't imagine it will eventually be a case of Gareth Bale taking over in any capacity at Plymouth Argyle, and the hunt obviously for the investment goes on. It's taken, let's say, a lot longer than I think any of us wanted or indeed anticipated, particularly again after the first season in the Championship, where it felt like we were prime candidates for that investment. And for whatever reason, that hasn't happened now. And in a couple of ways, as I say, I don't think it doesn't seem to me anyway that this Bale one was ever particularly serious, certainly from their side. But yeah, the fact that we're going into the start of another season and that investment hasn't happened is that a little bit of a concern. Yeah, I think it is. I'm not necessarily disappointed that Gareth Bale and consortium haven't invested into Argyle. I'm a bit disappointed that we've got to the end of June 2025 and nobody else has invested into Argyle. I wonder what's going on in the back room there. I know we've all got strong views on this, and it's something we've discussed before. But yeah, it's just another line in the investment drama, I think, that's got progressively more annoying and weird as we've gone on. And I don't see it stopping there.
I was going to say we probably don't need to regurgitate old thoughts on this, because as you say, we've devoted enough time to talking about potential investors and things. But John, one thing I took out of the press conference last week was it was a relief, whether or not it was a tongue-in-cheek comment by Andrew Parkinson or not, but it was a relief for him to knock back Chris Errington or James Vickery, whoever's question it was, by saying that we're not going to put a time frame on getting investment in. I think that's one bridge that has well and truly burnt, and they won't be rebuilding.
Yeah, I thought it was quite funny actually, because Parkinson kept saying words to the effect of like, when we have some news to share, we'll share it with you, which to me, as as a journalist, sort of encoded kind of businessman speak, sounded like code for there is actually something going on here, and we'll, we can't talk about it, but when we can, we'll talk to you, rather than this is an absolute load of nonsense. So I'm not really sure what was happening there. Maybe Parkinson was just kind of defaulting to no comment or trolling a little bit, or just, I don't know, maybe there was actually some interest or hoped for interest on the part of Bale and his consortium. All very murky. I wouldn't like to weigh on it per se. Yeah, I think in the sort of broader scheme of things, like clearly, consortiums of wealthy backers are using these kind of global superstar type players as the sort of hype men for bids, right? And so while it's kind of fun and sort of through the looking glass a little bit to be linked with a Gareth Bale-led consortium or whatever, given what a fabulous player he was, it's not really Bale, is it? And I think we all need to be really, really careful to scrutinise the identity and the motives of the people behind any such consortium that may or may not come into play for us in the future. Look, I've been very open that I think we need investment. I think everyone in the fan base would agree on that. I don't. I think Hallett himself has been very open that he can't get us to where we need to be, where we would love to be on his own. I also think we all have intimate first-hand experience supporting this football club of what can happen if you sell up to the wrong people, even if they look like the right people on paper. So I think it's important to not rush this. I think it's important to make absolutely sure we have the right people and that there is kind of an iron plan for them to come in and keep the club on a sustainable footing. Yeah, so I don't know. I find it very hard to evaluate this Bale bid because I'm very unclear as to whether it was serious or not, and also, who the identities of all of the implicated parties are. The fact it's Gareth Bale is kind of irrelevant, actually. So we'll see. Another false dawn, if it was a dawn at all.
But then again, I don't know, because there's so much confusion about it. It's actually really kind of hard to pass through. The initial person tweet said there was interest. Argyle had said no for now, but negotiations were ongoing. Then came the Ornstein article in The Athletic saying that Bale was interested in Cardiff, and it was actually quite ambiguously worded. It just said no interest in, when it comes to Plymouth Argyle. Now, a lot of people initially took that to mean no interest, in the sense that he was saying that Percy's story was wrong and that Bale was never interested. But some people also took it to mean, actually they had bid, but there was no interest from the Argyle point of view. And I came round to thinking it was that, but actually reading the article again from Ornstein, I'll try and find the exact quote. It just says he is not in the frame to acquire Plymouth Argyle, despite recent reports. So actually, that's kind of more indicating nothing happened, in the first place. But then again, what John also said, if there was absolutely no interest, in Parkinson would have said so. So I do actually think that there's clearly some ongoing discussion with somebody. Otherwise, Parkinson would have just flat out denied it. Whether it's the case that John Percy's maybe got two half bits of each story and spliced it all together to create the story he's had, inadvertently. I'm not saying he's intentionally misled at all, but whether that's what's inadvertently happened, I don't know. But then again, John Percy has never been wrong on Argyle. So, to sum up, maybe there was interest, maybe there wasn't. If there was interest, maybe it's ongoing and maybe it's not. Maybe it's fronted by Gareth Bale, maybe it's not. I do agree that we need to find the best long term. And I think it's kind of ironic that, for all the talk of Hallett in, Hallett out, I think Simon Hallett himself, it's probably Hallett out in one sense, and that he's quite openly said that, he wants to look for a long-term succession plan and he wants it to be the right person in the club. Now, maybe there's the argument of, is he maybe being a little bit too perfectionist, holding out for a a perfect owner who's never going to arrive, and maybe we should just find the next best possible thing. That's not an argument that I'm entirely unsympathetic to. But with this one, with this Bale business and all equity firm, whoever, there's just too much murkiness around it for me to come to any kind of substantive judgment as to whether there was any interest, and indeed, if there was any interest, how, where, why that interest is going the way it has. So, well, yeah, I have to wait and see.
It is murky, and it is something we can't answer now. One thing that I will say I completely agree with was something John mentioned of we need to take time over this, and I will take my hats off to the current regime and the current board after criticising them with the release clause and how we seem to get shafted with transfer fees. I deeply do appreciate that Hallett has come out and said we will cover the difference in this window between what the investors would have given us and what we had without them. I think that's a really good move on his part. It really gets fans, including myself, on side with what he's trying to do, and it does, more importantly than anything else, give us that leeway to still be competitive whilst trying to get the investors we want. So yeah, I think that was a really good move and one I very much appreciate.
From Sam down there was almost the track of an Oasis song. I think there was plenty, definitely maybes going on about future investment coming in to the Argyle board. Of course, any news that does come our way about investment, we will bring it to you as and when. I'm sure we can try and find an emergency pod and some financial experts who can come on and talk about any potential investors should that happen. But I think it's safe to say it's not going to be in place by the time the squad head to Austria or any time soon. But it is right that we exercise caution and take our time on finding the right people. One thing that will have boosted chances of getting investment was a trip to Raleigh, North Carolina this summer, and Plymouth Argyle took part in the TST 7-a-side tournament. And it's safe to say, when this was announced, I was ranking the TST below the Football League trophy. And those of you who are ardent Green and White podcast viewers will know I give the Football League trophy absolutely no credence whatsoever. However, I was absolutely hooked on the TST to the point I even watched the knockout stages when we weren't in it. Quintessentially American, utter bonkers, and just really good fun, lads, wasn't it? And actually, for our first go at what's quite a novel, strange tournament, we did ourselves proud getting out of the group stage, and we look quite capable at times. Are we all off to Carolina next year?
No.
Oh, come on.
No, that's a silly answer. I did actually.
Sam will be banned anyway.
No. I did actually enjoy it. I ignore John being silly. I did actually enjoy it. I enjoyed it far more than I thought I would, actually. I kind of like how it didn't try to be anything other than unashamedly American. And what I mean by that is I feel in the MLS, you have the trend of Americans trying to sort of ape European football culture, like they have United FC and City in their names. No, you're America, you need to have some kind of animal or something in your name. That's not how it works. And trying to mock or mimic European chant culture like some Americans do it and getting it badly wrong. I kind of like the fact that this was so all American. It could have come out of like a cheesy 1980s film, although you would with that target score time and these fantastic notions to that effect. And that one, it just felt so surreal that I'm sat there at 11:30 in the evening on a weeknight on my laptop hearing that was a fantastic play from Jack Endricott. And it just didn't feel quite right, but in the best possible way, it didn't feel right, And I do think that actually there is the chance it is a format that could take off in the long run, because not only the kind of and I use the word effectively, the gimmick of the target score time. So for those of you who didn't watch it, they would have a set time game, and at the end of that game, there would be like every game, even if a team was like 5-0 up, would go to like an overtime of a target score time. And the target score time would be the lead score +1, or if the game was tied, it would be the tied score +1. So obviously, naturally, then if the team 5-0 up, they would only have to score 1 more, whereas the team 5 down would have to score 6 more. So it obviously weights it in favour of the team who's already winning, but it nonetheless tries to end on the kind of climax of the goal. And I like that gimmick, but I also like the whole, 7-a-side format, the fact that it was more, maybe a little bit more around technical control than kind of charging about, which is obviously why the older players were more prevalent in it. That that kind of 7-a-side format, but being played by players who were of an elite level. To be absolutely clear, obviously it's the way I'd like to see football, go into mainstream sport. Absolutely not for a moment. But would I be open to watching more of that format? Then, yeah, you know what, I think I would. I think it was interesting, engaging. It was something a little bit different, and I did actually enjoy watching it. And I think that if there is the chance that it may develop our American fan base a little bit more in the long run, to the point where maybe we have some more foreign fans, buying shirts, maybe some more foreign fans subscribing to Argyle TV, etc., then all the better for it. But obviously, what I'd say is it can't just be TST. It's got to be part of a wider brand awareness in the USA. And who knows? Maybe if we'd have got very happy with Clevs. Obviously, if we'd have got David Wagner, then an American manager might have just been the cherry on the cake, as we were linked with him. But I think that it was certainly very enjoyable. Whether it proves to be a good investment for what Argyle have spent, getting a team out there and signing them up is maybe yet to be seen. But I'm certainly very open to the idea that it might have been.
John, just very quickly, just before you jump in, without over-analysing the footballing nuances of the tournament and looking too much into that side of it, from a brand exposure point of view, from the whispers certainly I've heard from out in Carolina and the things you see on social media and things, that was a really positive exercise by Argyle. Like, you see them putting up Instagram stories and things when they're in the fans village, or what we would call a fans village. I'm not sure what it was over there, but our little booth area was always incredibly popular with the American sports fans. So from that account, it was hugely successful, wasn't it?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't have viewership figures for it. I was actually struck by, and to be fair, I did enjoy watching it as well. I was actually kind of struck by how low quality the production values were of it. I sort of thought as something that was engineered to be a kind of media product consumed on YouTube or kind of via short clips on social media, that they would have a bit more of a kind of, slow motion replays, kind of all singing or dancing presentation about it, whereas actually it felt like something you were kind of watching at mahjons being live streamed over one camera sometimes. But yeah, I don't want to overstate the extent to which our brand in the US or anywhere else is going to live or die by this. I think it was good exposure. I think it was fun. Like on one level, on some kind of football purism level, was it objectively a bit of a disgrace? Yes. I mean, the rules were stupid. It was incredibly Americanized. No authenticity about it whatsoever. Never thought I'd see Plymouth Argyle play Dortmund, let alone Plymouth Argyle play a team called the Drunken Monkeys. But it was fun to watch. And crucially, it involved older players, retired players, people who aren't footballers at all. It wasn't, I don't think you can really interpret it as part of this absolutely, in my opinion, disgusting kind of FIFA-driven initiative to have all football on all the time. Fuck players' health, fuck players' condition. This Club World Cup in America is just an abomination. I think it's incredibly bad for the game. I don't think you can really accuse this of being in the same bracket. I think it's just kind of a bit of closed season fun. I actually went with my girlfriend and I were in Portugal, and we went to a very similar competition to this for women's players. Some of the top women's teams in Europe, Man United, Bayern Munich, Man City, PSG, and a few others, sent down teams to play in a very similar sevens style competition. It didn't have the target score time or any of that kind of thing, but it was like, half an hour small-sided games. And that was, again, not great from the point of view of, it was actual kind of professional current players who were in it. But as far as I know, they were all given the chance to say no to going. And it was only people who had chosen to be there. It was pretty low intensity stuff physically for them. It was very kind of friendly coded and kind of, short games with rolling subs. And the prize money was quite significant as well, I think. So there is clearly a move towards this sort of shorter format. I think as long as it doesn't supplant the beautiful game and it kind of keeps its place in late May and early June, and it's just sort of a curiosity, then I'm fine with it. I don't really see it as part of this kind of encroaching threat on, there must be football on involving the best teams in the world at all times, as Mr. Infantino would seem to want.
John will be
was
making a
the
couple of
only-
contributions towards the swear jar after that most recent rant, won't he?
Always the way.
He
Always
will.
the way.
And to be fair, I'd imagine those that follow rugby will have been quite anti-rugby sevens before it came in, but the sevens format is something that tours the globe. It's incredibly popular amongst rugby fans, so perhaps this sort of carnival type football tournament will catch on. One
Well, the other
thing that
analogy
is,
is white ball cricket, isn't it, Joe? Compared to
yeah,
obviously one match cricket.
yeah, exactly. T20 cricket was absolutely loathed back in 2003. Now it's probably the most well, it is the most played format anywhere in the world. Of course, we all keep our fingers crossed that the 100 never reaches such heights and it crashes and burns within the next couple of years, and we can forget it ever existed. One thing that is new and is popular and is very successful for Plymouth Argyle at the moment is the Talk Sport Cup, where I'm delighted to say that Plymouth Argyle's team in said Talksport Cup are with us this evening. Both Adam and Sam Down were in London this week. They were at the
And Joe,
Talksport Cup.
Joe, I think before you carry on, we should say that the result of this is under wraps. So if you could just talk about this
It
in
is.
general terms. Okay, good.
I'm going to. I'm not gonna give anything away.
That's good, because obviously to give away what happened in the Talksport Cup on this podcast, you have to be a complete moron, and I have no idea who has done something like that before.
I just want to know about the experience of it all. How on earth were you two chosen over me and John to represent Argyle Life? I think it's an outrage.
Well, I don't live in London, so.
Oh no, you don't. No, you'd have to take a commute into London, wouldn't you? But just the whole experience of it all, Sam, and what we can look forward to when we see your lovely faces when Talksport release footage of it.
Yeah, fantastic experience. Basically, the very basic the format, and again, I will have to be so careful with it, is that there are 64 different teams represented across 64 podcasts, and basically there's rounds of it to determine an eventual winner. I won't say how far we've got in that process, or anything more than that, but that's basically it. So we've been competing against other clubs, teams, other clubs, teams, great words, the podcast of other teams. That's what we've been doing, and a quiz format against them, hosted by the absolutely excellent Charlie Baker of Talksport, who is a Torquay fan, but we won't hold that against him. He's a lovely bloke, very funny guy, actually, very, very entertaining guy, really good to chat to on and off camera. And yeah, it's great being around the Talksport building. Got to meet a couple of the well, I say meet, sort of walk past the general direction of Troy Deeney, didn't we? But it was yeah.
He stopped for some people, but we didn't trouble him. We had business to attend to at that time, I believe.
Is there any?
Yes.
Is there an upcoming Simon Jordan My Argyle Life?
No. No, it was it's been very, very fun to go and do the quiz. And me and Adam both love sort of flexing our Argyle knowledge muscles, don't we? And we've had a fantastic time of it. And Talksport are actually releasing them on YouTube, I think, on a couple of daily basis. I think they're putting up about one every 2 or 3 days or so. We've not yet had mine and Adam's first round game released yet. I think it will be released fairly shortly. I don't know, because they're doing them in order. But then, yeah, you'll have to just watch that and see how we do. I'm sure Aaron will be furiously spamming all of your socials with links to the YouTube episode when it does come out, so you won't have any way of missing it unless you hide under a rock.
Yeah, been good fun, flexing those muscles, as is often the case, and they all say that Sam's muscles is quite a lot larger than mine. But nonetheless, it's been fun being part of that team, and it's kudos as well to Charlie Baker, who's mentioned as the host of it. Seemed very nice off camera as well as on camera, which is always nice to see. I know we're not giving any results away on this. What I will say is that Talksport Cup filming, getting to the end of the whole process hasn't actually happened yet, so we couldn't tell you how everyone did, even if we wanted to. So, that's gonna happen soon. But I think we've both thoroughly enjoyed the experience, and who knows, if there's another year, maybe we'll see if Team Allsop and Bell can do can do better than we did. We'll see. We'll have to find out.
Maybe that will be next year's challenge. Once we see footage of it, we will see whether me and John can beat your performance next year. However you did get on, let's hope you've beaten some of the clubs who we beat to the League One title, or that we beat to keep in the Championship. Who knows? Let's see how that goes. As you say, Aaron will keep us up to date with all things when TalkSport release that footage, and you can guarantee there will be screenshots of Sam and Adam's face absolutely everywhere over the Argyle Life social media channels. One last talking point on my list tonight before we get to some questions, and we do have some questions, and I can assure you Sam Down absolutely has to be succinct in his answers when it comes to the questions and answers, because his 90 seconds is not 90 seconds. Pre-season has been announced. We're having a behind closed doors game in just under a fortnight. Then we go to Austria for a week. Is there going to be a game? Is there not going to be a game? Who knows? Then we come back. We head down to Truro on a Wednesday night. I know myself, Aaron, and Sam are heading over the border down to Truro City for that one. A week late, or the 19th, then there's going to be another friendly, isn't there? Which is a TBA. That will be announced in due course once it's finalised. Then we go to Torquay on the 23rd before Adam Randell and Plymouth Argyle's Gerhard Struber bring Bristol City down to play Plymouth Argyle in a pre-season friendly before, of course, the season gets under the way the week after. Don't forget, fixtures are out on Thursday. There might well be something from us about that. It won't be a live stream. Don't get too excited, but we might do something novel for the fixtures on Thursday. Pre-season schedule isn't too much to get excited about. What games are obviously, Sam, I know you're going down to Cornwall. John, there's nothing local to you because you'd have to commute to any of them. Are there any games that, Adam, is there anything you're going to in particular, or are there anything that excites you?
I'll try and build it up, but no, not really. And it is a pre-season schedule. I think it's absolutely fine. I'll probably find myself at the Bristol City one. I did not take up the offer to get a ticket to the True, and although I watched Sam purchase his live on, I believe, Friday morning, and so it's good to see that we'll have a presence there. I'm still keen to see what the behind closed doors, whether we'll get a game in Austria. I'm assuming it's not going to be like TST, where we end up playing Borussia Dortmund, who are, of course, by far the biggest club in the Rhine-Ruhr industrial heartland of Germany. But no, I can't see that one happening, at least this time around. But yeah, whoever we do play, I'm sure it'll be a good test. There could be some sort of a South African, but not necessarily. Oh, no, it wasn't at all behind closed doors because we have members here who are there for Orlando Pirates. But maybe one of the big clubs in South Africa this time. It could be one of those that we could face. I don't know. We'll see. It's yeah. I think it's aside from all of those, it's a fairly standard list. And yeah, I will probably find myself at the Bristol City game. Keen to see how Plymouth Argyle's Gerhard Struber and ex-Plymouth Argyle's Adam Randell get greeted. I like to hope, I know this is getting it a bit more seriously to how I've just been talking, but I'd like to hope that Randell gets a very decent reaction on his return based on what Sam was saying earlier about how we distance ourselves from some of those strange comments that have been coming in since there. But yeah, pre-season, I'm glad it's been announced. I'm hoping there's more to come, and I'm hoping perhaps more than anything is that the game that we do play in Austria, if we do play it, is something that fans can attend. I think that's very important for those that have travelled over there to be able to see the team in action while they're making that trip and that holiday to support the club. And yeah, I'm not going there myself, but I hope whoever does gets the opportunity to watch some good football while they do.
Talking of fans going over there to pre-season, Sam, have you looked on EasyJet's website yet? Is there a Bristol to Innsbruck link?
Yeah, there are ways of getting there. Sort of alluding to what Adam just said, I'm not booking anything until I know that A, there's definitely going to be a game, B, who that game's going to be against, and C, most critically, that fans will be able to attend. It's not been publicly announced, but it is a fairly open knowledge that the club are selling a very highly priced package to the corporate members, which involves traveling with the team, staying at the hotel with the teams, door to door.
Does it still involve dinner with Miron Muslic?
No,
You'd hate to have printed a flag with his face on, wouldn't you?
That will probably be changed to dinner with Tom Cleverley, I imagine. But anyway, jokes aside, the club are selling a very exclusive package to their corporate members, which involves watching the game. Now, it's not entirely clear whether you'll be able to watch the game if you're not part of that corporate package. That's kind of the detail I'm waiting on. I think it would be very disappointing if not, given I think that was in previous years, not just last year, but in other years as well. That's been such a thing that fans have loved doing, going and having that pre-season experience, seeing your team play abroad, and maybe even having that open training session, that getting to know the squad a little bit. I think it would be a shame if that disappeared. I kind of get maybe they'll keep the Q&A side of it to the exclusive package. They've got to have something for their money, but I'd like to hope that at the very least we'll be able to see the game and even perhaps a training session in there as well. But we'll see. But I would like to go. It would be probably relatively easy for me to get the flexi time for work and go if the chance came up. But I'm not booking a thing, I'm afraid, until I know that there's definitely going to be a game that I'll be able to get into. And realistically, the longer they leave it before having that announcement, it's going to become more and more impractical for me to go last minute. So I think it's going to have to be announced in the coming days or so if there's going to be any likelihood of me going. But I'm not ruling it out. Maybe I will do.
Rest assured that we will be trying to bring you something from a pre-season game in the way of content. We're not quite sure of details of it yet, but we will do our best to bring you as much as we can. Who knows, we might even do a live stream at the end of the Bristol City game, recapping pre-season and then getting you an early season preview of the first game of the season. So I think that's just about it on my list of talking points tonight. So we'll head straight in to the questions, and there are plenty of them. All the way back at the start, Richard Sloman asked us, is there normally a script? We do try to keep things on track. We do have an idea of how things want to go. Paul Burke, usual commenter on the stream. Good to have you in again tonight, Paul. Says, what do you reckon, John, come to you on this one. What do you reckon our current available transfer funds are to make high-profile signings? It's no secret we made a significant profit on the January transfer window, and we didn't really spend a huge amount expenditure last summer, so the coffers must be fairly healthy.
Actually, don't really know. I'll defer to Sam on this one because I think he was saying the other day I might have more of a figure in mind.
How much is the trip? Okay, so the club have not officially released it in the sense that it's gone round to people who are already Diamond members, so it's not public information. I'll say that it starts with a 3 and it's not 300. Let's get it that way.
Sam, we're talking about transfer budgets.
Well, the comment came up on screen and you said, how much is it? I thought that was what you were asking me.
No. We're talking about that comment on screen.
Oh,
I have to show other live comments that come in as well. I can't just keep the one.
Well, okay. Well, I've now just given away how much they're charging the corporate members. Whoopsie.
Yeah, £3 million, right? That was what you said.
Yeah, delighted to bring you the last ever Green and White podcast brought to you by Argyle Life. Thank you.
I've not said anything untrue, to be clear. And anyway, it's not. I'm sure it's not a state secret. It's going around social media. Anyway, what I think the budget will be. Are we talking overall player expenditure budget, or are we talking purely on transfer fees? I think overall player expenditure budget, maybe like around the 9-ish, 10 million mark. On football expenditure, including Cleverly and his coaches, maybe around the 9-ish, 10 million mark, including agent fees and all the rest of it. Obviously, transfer fees of that will be a substantially lower part, but that's kind of roughly the area of what I'm guessing.
Okey-dokey, moving swiftly on. John, I'll throw this one to you then. Seems you deferred the last one. What other outgoings do you expect to see before the transfer window slams shut on September the 1st? You turn that light on without even flicking the switch. I feel like I'm in the presence of some sort of messiah here. And I've almost fallen off my chair. What signings or what sales are we going to have between now and the end of the season as I sink lower into the floor?
In terms of other players who have not gone out yet, I think the ones that we were sort of mostly keeping an eye on to go have indeed gone. I don't know. There aren't too many others in the squad that I have particular concerns about going. Connor Hazard, I think, is a championship quality goalkeeper as assessed earlier. and I could see him maybe going, especially because obviously he's got an international place to concern himself with. That being said, I don't necessarily think there's a huge difference between playing at the top end of League One and the lower end of the Championship for a goalkeeper. I think the sort of skills that you show in that position, maybe there's not such a big gulf between the two divisions. You can still kind of prove yourself at the top end of League One. I'd imagine if he stays, he'll be the automatic first choice as well. Although obviously I don't know about that. Cleverly could, of course, try and get someone in as a number one rather than a backup. We're obviously going to be signing in that area. Other departures wise, there aren't really too many others. I mean, Maxi, is the one that we've not talked about, who is, I think, definitely gone. I've no expectation that he'll be here next season. Seems a pretty open secret that he is angling for a move away, and hopefully we can recoup what we paid for him. Mumba as well, I'm seeing on screen. He's another one. I actually wouldn't be totally surprised if he is still here at the beginning of the season. Obviously, he has had a lot of reported interest from Championship clubs. But equally, I think he's a player who, while he has a lot of strengths, does have some weaknesses as well, certainly in the defensive side of it. I think the teams who play a certain system might well be looking to get him in, but he might just be one sort of target among others. So I don't think it's completely out of the question that he remains at the club, and I certainly hope he does. I think he'd be a fabulous player to retain in League One, and I certainly hope with him that there's a expectation we would at least recoup what we paid for him a couple of years ago, if not more so on that. And then, Al Hajj and Beidou, the noises seem to be that they're going to stay. I really, really strongly think they will. I won't do my sort of spiel about them again, but, both players are players who came into the club, didn't have the happiest season here after moving from abroad. So I guess it's a possibility that we could see one of those kind of have a life raft to go back to Scandinavia or elsewhere that they take. But I'd say that's a low expectation. So, I think Maxi definitely will go. Otherwise, there's no one I'd be massively surprised to see them stay at the club. And a few where I wouldn't be massively surprised to see them leave either, but I don't think it's a done deal by any means.
I'm going to try and keep my head in shot now for the rest of this program, as my chair is failing me, unfortunately. It is quite old and decrepit, a bit like me. Adam, coming your way on this one, it's basically off the back of Tom Cleverley's press conference last week, where there were quite a few buzzwords used: long-term stability, project, long-term, all of that sort of thing. Do you think he's genuine, or are we being a bit more cautious this time around, not to be drawn in by a manager's words?
I hope so, of course, and I think it would be brilliant for both parties if this was a long-term relationship and the club returned to the Championship and Cleverley got his stock higher and higher. There's a couple of reasons actually why I think it could well be the case that he's here for a while. The first of those is the fact that he almost seemed to bring it up unprompted, particularly in his first interview. I know the press conference, there were questions about it specifically, but in the first interview, some of his first times saying, "I'm here for the long term, you'll get loyalty from me and my staff." I think, hey, that's a positive side. He wasn't asked directly about it and he said it, which is great. The other thing that I think may mean that he's convinced to stay here for a little longer than perhaps some others we've had in recent months is the fact that he's already experienced what it's like to have a mid-table Championship job and being paid a little bit more, have a higher budget than at least Argyle do. But it's a complete mess behind the scenes. The fact that he's toughed it out for as long as he did at Watford is actually almost a minor miracle. And I get the impression that he's not the sort of character who'd want to throw himself into that sort of environment again. At least with Schumacher, which, I mean, obviously him leaving was a very stupid decision to go to the particular club he did, but he hadn't had that experience of a Championship club had at a time, and he perhaps had the idea of, oh, well, I can be the one to change it. And obviously that wasn't the reality. Cleverley's coming the other way around. He's already had that experience in the Championship, and he may be a little bit hesitant to go back into that sort of situation. All of this being said, football's football. We know what it's like. We wouldn't expect ourselves to stay loyal to Cleverley if he had us in the relegation zone. We'd be calling for his head. And of course, if he ends up in 6 months having us at the top of the league with a better offer, it wouldn't be the first time a Plymouth Argyle manager has gone back on his word. So we will be a little bit cautious. But yeah, I'm hopeful and optimistic, and I can see a route to this being a situation that lasts for the long term, which of course I hope it does.
SR comes back with, are we to make appearances for at the TST next year for Argyle? I'm not sure, even though it is 7-a-side, I'm still not sure I'll be able to get around the pitch. But if Argyle do want us to go out and help with some content ideas next year, we will be more than happy. My ESTA's in date until next November anyway, so legally I can still enter the United States of America without going through any paperwork. So if they do want any help, we're happy to help them out in any way. Just Janice says, is there any news on Connor Hazard after his injury? I think that was touched upon in the press conference last week. It's not as bad as they first feared, and they're hoping that he'll be able to get some game time in the final preseason friendly, with then obviously a view to coming into the squad for the opening day of the season. But naturally, a goalkeeper will be on the shopping list. If you do want to know what I think about should be on the shopping list, check out my latest Vital Football article, which I'll be putting up on X later on. I did a recruitment piece on there. Richard Sloman, Sam, has a very pointed question towards you off the back of your TST comments. How do you feel about players running out one by one next to flags at the Club World Cup at the moment?
Yeah, no, I'm not a big fan of that, to be clear. And like I said, and as John said, being in favour of this in its own format doesn't necessarily mean that we want this kind of stuff to infiltrate every aspect of the game, and certainly doesn't mean that supportive of this push to kind of always have football happening at all times. I do think it will lead to player burnout and player injuries. And I know the old line will be, well, these players play millions of pounds a week. They should play whenever we bloody well want them to. But, even if they do try their hardest to play whenever we want them to, that still doesn't stop them getting injuries. It still doesn't stop them having, muscle fatigue. They're not supermen, So it will still cause injuries, and it will still mean that players aren't playing to their top level. And I think this is a bit of a thing of quantity over quality of football, this Club World Cup agenda. So no, I'm not supportive of all of that. I mean, it's something to watch on an evening when I get home from work if I'm bored or just want something on in the background whilst I eat tea. But it's not a serious competition. I'm not a great lover of it, to be honest. Certainly not in the time that it's in, where basically the Chelsea and Man City players are pretty much not going to have any kind of off season at all. It will lead to burnout and to a lower quality of football in general.
One thing that is a serious competition, however, is Sky Bet League One. And the fixtures for that come out on Thursday. And Julian Holiday wants one-word answer, basically. Who do you want on the opening day of the season? Adam, why don't you kick us off? Literally.
One-word answer is going to be slightly different, because it will be 3 words, which is anybody at home.
Sam?
Port Vale.
John?
Yeah, Port Vale away would have a nice symmetry to it, wouldn't it? After that was our last game in League One, we all know how that went. I think any game that allows Cleverley to get off to it gives him the best chance of getting off to a good winning start. So extra at home, I guess.
I've no real preference. I think a home game would be good. One that hasn't come in, but I'll throw it your way anyway. Boxing Day 2025. Will we be gracing Home Park, or are we bound for Reading? What do we think?
We have to play at home on Boxing Day at some point. It just has to happen. So this is the year, I reckon.
You don't think that the Football League are going to do what the Premier League have done and no Boxing Day football this year, do you? With the Saturday being the 27th?
I think that's just like a default date, but with TV selection, some of them will in fact be played on Boxing Day, is my understanding of what's going on there. Maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, we've got to have a New Year. We've got to have a home game on Boxing Day eventually. We've also got to eventually have an away day on New Year's Day. I was saying this to John and Adam walking through London at the weekend when I was up for Talk Sport. The last time we had an away game on New Year's Day was 2013, when Carl Fletcher famously announced his own sacking in the post-match interview.
Bristol Rovers.
Bristol Rovers. Yeah, that's what I said, wasn't it?
Did you? I don't know. Sorry.
Yeah, it was. Well, that's who it was anyway. As Ollie said in the comments there, it's normally Boxing Day away, New Year's Day at home, and we've had 2 Boxing Days at home. which was 2015 Yeovil and 2016 Wickham. But on both of those following games, there wasn't actually a game on New Year's Day at all. In 2016 was then Carlisle away on the 2nd, which was actually Ewood Park, and 2017 was 2017 was Barnet away on the 2nd. So the last time before that we were home on Boxing Day was 2012, which then was the infamous Bristol Rovers game 2013. And actually, going back even deeper, I think we've only actually, in my entire time as a fan, which goes back to 2002, we've only been away on New Year's Day, I think twice. Because on all of the other games where there's been an away game, it's been on the 2nd or 3rd. So it's pure fluke the way it's played out. We've never really had New Year's Day away game. We had 2005 at Wolves, and we had 2013 at Bristol Rovers. And I genuinely think that, unless anyone can correct me, I genuinely think they are the only two. So we'll see. Maybe we'll finally have a home game on Boxing Day and an away game on New Year's Day, and we'll see how that plays out. But probably more likely it'll stick to the same form. Sorry, I'm chuckling away all the comments coming in. Superintendent saying I think Ollie should be on the Argyle Life panel. I think he needs to limit himself to more sensible contributions only before we can consider him for that. But maybe one day, if you keep going, you might get a call up, Ollie.
You never know. One final
in London.
Yeah, one final thing. I don't know whether any of us know the answer to this, really. Away kit. I know we had it on the Tom Cleverley stream last week. We keep hearing that black and gold is a combination that's being thrown around. Any idea on when we might see it?
Sam doesn't know, but he will give you a 15-minute history of the date that we've released our away kit for the last 23 years.
The black and gold sounds nice.
Sung by Sam Sparrow, isn't it?
Yeah.
Who remembers that?
Yeah, very good. Yeah. Just sounds good. Well, it'll come out when I'm just amazed it's not been leaked yet, to be honest. It normally is, but it'll come when it comes.
It certainly will. And I don't quite know how we've managed to do it, but we've managed to drag out a roundup pod for 1 hour and 52 minutes. That is the succinct Argyle life that you've all come to know and love. And one thing that has amazed me is the stream numbers that have just steadily risen all the way through. And for some reason, and I can't fathom why, over 3,000 of you have given up your Sunday night tonight to listen to us ramble on about everything that's gone on over the last few weeks. And guess what? This isn't even our final end of pre-season podcast. We will be back before the season starts with a full roundup of pre-season and everything that's gone before it. I'm sure there will be one or two more players signings and player sales that we'll be able to discuss. And I'd like to think that we won't be having an emergency podcast about our manager being poached by somebody else before we return. So thank you ever so much to the 3,000 of you who've joined us tonight. Thank you to Adam, to Sam, to John for joining me. Thank you for all the comments that have come in. Many of them have been very interactive, and some of them have just been downright silly. But that's why we love being an interactive show, and we wouldn't want it any other way, Ollie. So thanks, lads, and we look forward to being back. We will, as I say, we'll have some form of content coming your way on Thursday with the fixture release. Keep an eye out for that, 9 o'clock, I think it is. But until we are back during pre-season, keep smiling, enjoy the nice weather while we've got it. We'll see you.